Start. So a very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for investing your time with us today. I'm Elizabeth Dartnell, the Executive Director of the Sexual Violence Research Initiative, and have the very great honor of opening the webinar to launch our newest knowledge exchange on healing from sexual violence, body-focused mental health approaches. I promise you a very fulfilling and thought-provoking next 75 minutes or so. We have an amazing panel with us to discuss the knowledge exchange and different approaches to mental health and care for victims of and survivors of sexual violence. So please do stick with us. Before introducing the panel, just some comments. The webinar will be recorded with your permission, and we will share it after the webinar, probably 2 or 3 days after the webinar. We'll download the recording and share it both on our website and in the SVRI update. So for those of you not in our time zone and not able to attend because of time, you will be able to experience this wonderful panel. And if you have any questions to the panelists throughout the webinar, please write them in the chat. And if time, we will answer your questions during the webinar, but if not, we'll respond to your questions in writing. So now let me introduce this amazing panel. Next slide, please, Liesl. So first of all, we have Niyati Shah first up. Niyati has over 20 years experience as a MindBody Wellbeing practitioner, focusing on trauma-centered approaches and collective care. Niyati is currently working with the World Bank Group. And today, Niyati is going to take us through a short meditation just to get us started. Following Niyati, we have Abby Shepherd-Fields from the Central University of Nicaragua. Abby is a psychologist based in Managua and is the lead author on the Knowledge Exchange and will present the key messages that we hope to share with you today. So thank you, Abby. After the formal presentation, Dr. Claudia Garcia Moreno will facilitate a panel discussion. Claudia is many things, but most importantly for us today, Claudia is a founder of the Sexual Violence Research Initiative. She is also the SVRI Forum Chair, our key biennial conference, which will be held in 2022 in Mexico. Everybody's invited, please join us. And Claudia is also the lead on the World Health Organization's work on gender and women's health. Claudia is going to be discussing with a panel about healing after violence. And on the panel is Sophie Namey, a co-creator of this knowledge exchange along with Abby and myself. Sophie is also a feminist researcher and program in the field of violence against women and some remarkable practical experiences, and the founder of a really wonderful yoga-based approach to healing after violence. We also have Hope Chiguru, an internationally renowned consultant with profound experience in healing organizations, governance, and creative monitoring and evaluation. And we have Dan Lakin, a researcher at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, who recently completed a review on mental health care for survivors of gender-based violence. So welcome, Dan. We're going to be ending the event with an optional, meaning you don't have to stay, but we hope you do stay, somatic exercise delivered by the wonderful Anne Ekman, who has over 20 years experience in violence against women. And over the past 5 years, Anne's been really concentrating on mental health and resilience. So we do hope you stick around for that. And finally, I want to thank Liesl Lutz from the SVRI for producing today's webinar for us. So we are in wonderful company. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Niyati to ground us and welcome us into the webinar. Thank you, Niyati.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here in community with you all. Part of the benefit of the mindfulness approach is about creating and engaging in a space that allows us to connect our energy, our spirit, our mind, and our body. And there are many ways to do this. And today we thought we could start this discussion on healing with a guided grounding meditation to help create both a collective and individual space for us to connect and to heal as a community. So let's get started. If you'd like to, and it's accessible to you, you can take a seat on the ground or stay seated in a chair where you are. And I'm going to give you a moment and pause to adjust your seating and space. As you take your seat, I invite you to gently either close your eyes or you can keep them slightly open and focused on a point on the ground that feels natural to you. As you close your eyes, just gently notice how your body feels on your chair or the ground, and slowly bring your awareness to your breath. Breathing in, breathing out. Bringing awareness to where your body is sitting and how it's rooted to a solid foundation. This could be your feet on the floor or your seat on a chair. Maybe your hands pressing into your lap. Imagine the layers of earth beneath your floor. And again, gently press your feet into the ground. And if it's accessible to you, feel the weight of your body slowly ease as you continue to bring your awareness back to your breath. Breathing in, breathing out. And take a moment to send gratitude to yourself, gratitude to the ancestors holding up the earth beneath us, and gratitude to the sky and the possibility it embodies above us. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, bring your awareness to your eyes. Breathing out, allow your eyes to relax. As you breathe, imagine your eyes sinking to the back of your head, releasing tension in all the tiny muscles around your eyes. Our eyes allow us to see a paradise of form and color. They allow us to observe stories around and inside of us. In this moment, allow your eyes to rest. Breathing in, breathing out, sending gratitude to your eyes. Breathing in, bring your awareness to your mouth. Breathing out, allow your mouth to relax. As you breathe, releasing the tension around your jaw, finding some ease in your cheeks. Allowing your tongue to relax. As you breathe, sending gratitude to your mouth, your throat, and your voice. Breathing in, bring your awareness to your heart. Breathing out, invite your chest to relax. If you'd like to, you can place one hand on top of the other over your heart, gently caressing the heart space and feeling the chest expand and contract with the rhythm of your breath. Our heart beats for us night and day. As you breathe in and breathe out, embrace the space with a sense of mindfulness and tenderness. Sending gratitude and care to your heart. Breathing in, breathing out. Acknowledging the energy in your body. Again, feeling rooted to your foundation. I have nowhere to go. I can be here with myself, with us all in this moment. Breathing in, breathing out. May I know how to nourish the seeds of joy in myself every day. May I know how to nourish the seeds of joy in them every day. May I be peaceful, happy, and light in body and spirit. May they be peaceful, happy, and light in body and spirit. May I be able to live fresh, solid, and free. May they be able to live fresh, solid, and free. Following your breath, slowly bring your awareness back to your foundation, gently pressing your feet on the floor or your hands in your lap. To close out this practice today, we'll take 2 collective breaths together. Take a deep breath in, pause at the top of your inhale, And on your exhale, open your mouth and fully exhale, perhaps with a sigh as you feel your body soften and relax. Let's do that again. Breathing in, pause at the top, and exhale. Let it go. Taking another moment to feel the gratitude for the opportunity to experience the present moment together. Gratitude for the power of your awareness, of your inner intelligence, and our natural state of being. Slowly and gently, as you're ready to, slowly fluttering your eyes open, wiggling your fingers and toes, maybe taking a quick neck roll, and gently making your way back to our collective space, hopefully feeling a sense of grounding and connection, as well as gratitude. And as you come back to your space, part of creating a community of healing and sharing in these types of practices, we'd like to invite you to share in the chat function a word expressing what you're grateful for in this moment. It can be anything at all. And what we're going to do with fabulous technology is create a word cloud to share at the end of this panel the different things that everyone is feeling grateful for in this moment. So really enjoyed creating this container for us to feel a sense of community, and looking forward to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niyati. And I love that we have nowhere to be except for here. Thank you. That was really wonderful. Without further ado, we're going to hand over to Abby. While you're filling your Mentimeters in, Abby's going to share with us the knowledge exchange. Thank you, Abby, while Liesl puts up the slides.
Thank you.
Abby, while the slides are coming up, maybe you can start so long.
There we go.
Cool.
Okay. Hello. It's so wonderful to see so many people here today who are interested in this topic. I would like to begin by reading you something a Nicaraguan woman told me after taking part in a trauma-informed yoga program. Her name is Juanita. Next slide, please. I was looking for the key, and I think I found it. I no longer feel the same weight or the same emotion, the same guilt. I feel completely calm, relaxed, safe. There is something that happened, and now I can see it. Yes, I think the yoga has had a lot to do with my healing process, because if not, it wouldn't have been possible for me to connect with myself or understand others, because I feel like everything was shut down, everything was deafened, because you're so stuck in the pain. Next slide. This knowledge exchange was motivated by a desire to better understand why so many survivors of sexual violence continue to struggle for years, not only with psychological problems, but also in their intimate relationships, in their ability to regulate emotions, in their connection with their own bodies, and with a range of physical problems. In addition, it presents new research theories about the unique way traumatic memories are processed in the brain, circumventing the frontal cortex, and recorded instead in the limbic area. As a result, such memories often cannot be accessed through cognitive talk-based therapy, which has important implications for treatment. This same research also underpins much of our understanding of the relationship between the body and mind in healing processes. Finally, we wanted to share some of the positive outcomes of body-focused programs and encourage more holistic and effective trauma recovery research and interventions. Next slide. The PTSD diagnosis has been something of a double-edged sword within the predominant paradigm of psychology. A one-size-fits-all conceptualization of the impact of all traumatic experiences across all cultures, it highlights a group of symptoms: intrusive thoughts, avoidance, emotional numbing, and hyperarousal, which, although frequently present at some point for most sexual violence survivors, do not capture many problems that frequently arise and continue over time. In the early 1990s, psychologist Judith Herman and others formulated some alternative conceptualizations to PTSD. Complex trauma identified a range of impacts that seemed to better typify the more complex psychological condition of survivors of sexual violence. These include problems regulating emotions and impulses, difficulties with attention and memory, shame, guilt, and self-blame, problems with trust and intimacy in relationships, a sense of hopelessness, and pain and other bodily dysfunction. These conditions, along with the negative body image often experienced by sexual violence survivors, who may feel disconnected from their bodies and may experience their body as unsafe, damaged, uncontrollable, or confusing, can recur for years and years. The survivor often has no sense that they may be linked to a prior trauma. Next slide. In recent decades, psychiatrists, neuropsychologists, and other researchers have proposed that under certain trauma-inducing conditions, especially when escape or self-defense is impossible, experiences are processed differently due to the specific neurological circuitry that's activated. Human instinct automatically triggers neurological and hormonal processes when survival is threatened, which in turn affect the way that memories are stored in the brain. Next slide. Normally, the most developed part of the human brain, the prefrontal cortex, takes in information and creates a narrative that's then incorporated into memory. When trauma occurs, however, the thalamus, located in that executive part of the brain, completely shuts down. So although an imprint of the experience is left behind in the brain, it lacks a corresponding story. Sometimes there's explicit memory of the event, sometimes there isn't. Because of the state of activation during trauma, the experience is recorded in a more primitive part of the brain, the limbic area, whose functions include perceptions and emotions. Unlike memories processed in the frontal cortex, feelings associated with traumatic experiences are stored as a series of separate sensations rather than part of a coherent and accessible story. The lack of cognitive access to such non-narrative memories can limit the ability to heal. Next slide, please. Being traumatized, whether due to exposure to war, torture, or sexual violence, means people can find themselves out of sync with their own bodies and what is going on around them. Trauma can get locked in the body, leaving many victims feeling immobilized and helpless, or in a continuous state of alert, never able to calm. A person who's been sexually abused as a child, for instance, can understand what has happened and how it has affected them, but still keeps reacting. To control the response, the body memory also needs to be attenuated. And this is not a cognitive process, it is somatic. Next slide, please. Despite its documented usefulness in many therapeutic settings, the effectiveness of cognitive-based therapies, especially talk therapy, in treating the long-lasting symptoms associated with trauma is not clear. In contrast, a range of techniques focused on both the body and mind have sought new ways of accessing traumatic memories without provoking the painful re-experiencing often triggered when verbally recounting traumatic events. These techniques include EMDR, somatic experiencing, neurofeedback, meditation, yoga, and others. Next slide, please. When yoga is part of a trauma healing process, The goal is learning to tolerate bodily feelings and sensations, achieving a greater connection with oneself, more awareness of what is happening on the inside, and learning to modulate activation, or the triggering of automatic responses through reminders of a previous trauma. Yoga helps people to deal with body responses that are often set off by sensory stimuli, images, smells, or other sensations, through learning to recognize emotions rather than avoid them. It engenders a greater sense of security or safety in the moment and helps integrate these emotional memories as positive sensations in the present. Next slide. In a study about the mind-body relationship in healing from trauma, conducted in Nicaragua in 2017, adult female survivors of child sex abuse who took part in a trauma-informed yoga program underwent dramatic, life-altering changes that included notable reductions in physical, psychological, and emotional symptoms, and positive growth in the form of greater tolerance of sensations, reconnection with their bodies, increased self-acceptance and self-awareness, and improved intimate relationships. The outcome of the yoga practice that seemed to resonate most strongly with the women was their sense of reconnection with their bodies. The alienation they'd experienced from their bodies as adolescents and young women had given rise to numerous physical and psychological symptoms. Thus, connecting again, beginning to accept and love their bodies, was a central component of healing and positive growth. Next slide. Not all human beings respond in the same way to traumatic events, and not everyone exposed to sexual violence requires psychological attention. Similarly, not all survivors of trauma respond by working through their experience, as suggested by the Western model of psychotherapy. A growing body of evidence points to the importance of engaging the body in trauma healing. As so clearly stated by Brown and Courtois in a recent APA article, clinicians need to attend to what our clients are telling us about what does and does not work for them. We need to follow the innovators. We must take culture, context, and our clients' intersectional identities into account in understanding the meaning of their trauma and their idioms of distress, rather than attempt to squeeze people, particularly those from marginalized groups, into a one-size-fits-all paradigm. Next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abby. We would really like you to invite, we would like to invite you to put any questions that you have in the chat, and we will respond to you either in writing if time after the panel discussion in this webinar. But I would like to say thank you, Abby. That was a really wonderful overview of the knowledge exchange. And now I'm going to hand over to Claudia to take over the baton of facilitation. Over to you, Claudia. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Abby, and Nyat for a great start. Liz has already kindly introduced our great speakers for today. We have Sophie, we have Hope, and we have Daniel. And we're going to spend the next 25 minutes, and we're right on time actually, to hear about different types of therapeutic approaches. I think that Abby's ending moves us right into this issue of, what is the menu that we have? We have a range of approaches, some that have been evaluated for longer, some that are more innovative. But really what we want is to have as large a menu as possible so that we can respond to the different needs. And as Abby just said, in a way that is culturally sensitive, contextually sensitive, and that really understands the different traumas. So without more ado, I'm just gonna start with Sophie. And I'm going to ask her to tell us a little bit about how HRT, which is the work that she has been doing promotes well-being and positive mental health, specifically for survivors of human trafficking.
Yeah, thanks so much, Claudia. It's such an honor and a privilege to be part of this panel. And honestly, it's so heartening to see so many of us longing in from all over to discuss this important topic today. So thank you. And thanks, Niyati, for that grounding. I think I needed it a lot before getting started today. So I'd just like to start, I'd like to underscore something Abby's really already touched on, that trauma is a shared experience. It's something we all experience as human beings, and really none of us are immune to that. However, when we think about our ability to be resilient in the face of trauma and to bounce back from traumatic events, that's often shaped by structural factors and also just our ability to access meaningful support and care. And HEART is an acronym. It stands for Healing and Resilience After Trauma, which we created the program really for this reason, to offer a feminist space for women and girls who've experienced human trafficking or other forms of violence, to connect with their inner resilience, to build community with one another, and also to collectively heal from the lingering impacts of trauma. So the program itself, it's 12 weeks, and it's each session builds from the week prior, and it's very much informed by the framework that Abby has just shared. So really acknowledging that trauma leaves its imprint on the body and can disrupt neurological and physiological processing. And I think it's important to just pause for a moment and recognize that these disruptions can make it exceedingly difficult for survivors to heal, to experience well-being, and to really feel safe in their own bodies. And at the same time, we're also really motivated by this concept of resilience and the innate capacity we all share to move through difficulty and heal. And sometimes that can be really profound and transformative as well. So I just would like to briefly share that last year in 2020, we implemented a mixed methods evaluation with our partner Willow International in Kampala. And we were programming in one of their residential shelters for women and girls who have experienced trafficking. Our outcomes, they showed statistically significant reductions in symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And that was compared to a group that didn't go through the program. We had a pretty small sample. However, we find that these findings are really exciting and they're really encouraging, especially if we just take a moment to consider the context of the global pandemic, which I think challenged mental health for many, if not all of us. And our qualitative data was supportive. We heard many very compelling accounts of personal changes from the program, and also just the resonance and salience in everyone's lives. And Katie Carlson, who is HEART's co-director, and she's a researcher at the University of Alabama, I think she's going to share a couple of quotes in the chat so you can get a sense of how this was expressed from the participants. So thank you so much, and back over to you, Claudia.
Thank you very much, Sophie. We'll come back to more questions if we have the time. So I'll move on to Daniel. Daniel, could you tell us about what are some of the promising interventions for populations that have been affected by violence in humanitarian contexts based on the review you have done?
Sure. First of all, hi everybody, it's nice to be here. And I think it's nice to be a part of a dialogue that kind of involves sides from GPV, from the mental health spheres, because historically in terms of research and practice and implementation, we've all kind of functioned in a relatively siloed fashion. And it's nice to start, despite the fact that they're kind of self-evidently related right now in the GPV world. So it's nice to kind of have everybody at the table and start having these conversations in the open. I think in response to your question, it's important to kind of preface these things based on something that Abby mentioned, which is that we need to consider the kind of culture and context for the beneficiaries with whom we're working. So the kind of critical question is really like, what's something that fits the needs of our beneficiaries from both a cultural, contextual, and kind of personal perspectives. Along those lines, there's kind of two divergent paths. Folks can either kind of choose a more generalized approach that's kind of attempting to address broad-based psychosocial issues within a given community or context, or something that is more specialized and dedicated to issues of trauma, of gender-based violence, specific mental health problems. As it stands, in terms of interventions, the literature base as we know it is pretty largely skewed towards cognitive behavioral therapy interventions, CBT interventions. But that is in and of itself kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you know that CBT works, you're ultimately going to use CBT, which in turn kind of boosts the evidence base, which in turn leads more people to use CBT and so on. And so there's a bit of a one-size-fits-all approach that's kind of inherent in that, because everybody is kind of identifying with a given intervention modality. And so I think that contemporary research is kind of seeking out, again, to Abby's point, these kind of innovative or new strategies that not necessarily challenge that kind of CBT hegemony, but are at least kind of representative of alternative thought. And so in terms of promising interventions, kind of moving beyond the CBT script, or at least building on it in pursuit of something else, there's a few things that are kind of incorporating mindfulness-based practice, mind-body practice, etc., that are starting to be tested in humanitarian context. Specifically, acceptance and commitment therapy is a third wave cognitive therapy that is incorporating mindfulness-based approaches, and is currently being tested in kind of a broad-based form as an intervention called Self-Help Plus, which is being developed in conjunction with the WHO, and shares the same kind of theory of change as acceptance and commitment therapy. This kind of mindfulness-based approach that focuses on individual values, that focuses on focusing, and mindfulness-based approaches, again, to focusing on individual healing. For more specialized trauma-focused approaches, there's things that have a broad literature base related to cognitive processing therapy or narrative exposure therapy, both of which are kind of dedicated, specialized interventions that rely on the kind of trauma narrative and a guided reappraisal of that narrative, some through more kind of conventional CBT-based approaches, some using more creativity or arts-based techniques for narrative exposure therapy. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly to this group, trauma-sensitive yoga, mind-body approaches have a mountain of research to support their kind of efficacy in high-income settings, but we're still kind of trying to build the evidence base up, as it were, in low-income or humanitarian context. And so it's really nice to hear that Sophie is evaluating heart, especially in Uganda, and starting to kind of build the evidence base in places where it's lacking. And so I'm going to make a shameless plug for some of the work that I did with Claudia, and say that all of this is kind of summarized in a broader format, and also kind of includes useful references and kind of helpful guides. We've incorporated all of it into kind of a larger review for the WHO that's forthcoming. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Daniel. Sorry, I switch on and off my video. I'm going to move to Hope to ask her to share about the importance of creating supportive and healing circles. It'd be good. And then I'll come back to a second round of questions if we have time, and see how we can pull it all together. Over to you, Hope.
Thanks very much, Claudia. I'm going to speak from an African perspective, but even then, I think that what I'm going to say might apply to other countries, other nationalities, others, wherever you may be. One thing we learned from HIV and AIDS is that creating, supporting healing circles is very important. If it wasn't for these healing circles, Africa would have perished. Healing is a journey. It's not something that you can, just wake up and say, oh, I've been doing this, I've been doing that, and I'm healed. No, it's a journey. And the other thing about this journey is that you have to reveal. You have to find a safe, a courageous space where you can reveal what you have gone through. And you have to find healing, especially of the womb, because when we get sexually abused, the womb really gets affected. And if we don't reveal, there is an overload of emotions. Those who have used pressure cookers know. When there is steam and you just open and there is an explosion. So you have to reveal so that you don't explode. So when we talk about healing circles, we are talking about genuine, authentic groups that really care, groups that share experiences, groups that are willing to be generous, they are willing to distribute resources, and they are willing to share love and support, but also to share some healing strategies. It's not easy to find one, but if you can't find one, or if you are working with an organization and you can't find one, encourage people to create one. Because healing, when you seek positive people who inspire you and teach you how to be better and how to speak up, then healing becomes much easier. Even then, you don't heal overnight, but it becomes easier. So identifying a community that speaks to your needs, because there are many communities, and in these communities, there are issues of sexuality, sexual orientation, there are issues of class, there are issues of, gender, there are many issues. There are, there is homophobia, there is racism, there is class, there are all those things. So you have to find a group that speaks to your needs, a group that speaks to your values, and then, set up values that are going to guide the group. Agree on how often you should meet, and find a way of checking in, in each other, expressing love. You know how it is when you wake up in the morning and things are really difficult, and someone says to you, okay, I'm here, I can support you. These groups can also agree to take care of each other's families, especially if they are children. There are groups that will provide food if you have nothing. There are groups that will check on you, if you are weak and you are not able to go out. They are patient groups, and they take action. And every day, trying to get together, but also creating personal plans. If you're in a group, create a personal plan, and then ask others to hold you accountable. So this is a summary of what these groups are. I think in Africa, we are used to creating them. Women have always worked in groups, even some men, whether they are working in each other's gardens, whether they are making pots. But the most important thing is that create circles of support and ensure that these circles of support are very, very clear about their values. There is no discrimination. And some of the usual discriminatory practices are discussed. And that, there is love. We know they have worked because they worked with HIV and AIDS. We know they have worked because we have got friends, and we know how some of us have created those circles that help us. At the organizational level, we have got to be mindful too of what violence does to us. Listening stories of violence day in, day out, and you carry them home. One of the things that we could do, is to organize, to have open days where our families come and see what we do. Because when we go home really upset, sometimes families don't understand why we're upset. When we go and hide in our rooms, they don't understand. So having that open day where you take your family, to work so that they see what you do, creating, culture days where people come and express, where they come from, but above all, creating space where people can download whatever is going on in the body. The human rights defenders tend to absorb the pain of those they are defending. And as this goes on over and over again, they may not be very different from those that they are defending, because the pain becomes really, really intense. So just to summarize, circles of support can be used in healing processes, because if you don't reveal, it's very difficult to heal. You can have affirmations as you meet. People meet and have affirmation. You can agree on the do's and don'ts, the values, the rituals that help in support. Some of the rituals have been mentioned. It might be yoga, it might just, sharing stories, it might be sharing food, but there must be space for talking and sharing. Circles of support work if people talk about things that tend to cause shame. taboos and embarrassment, if they can, talk about that in these circles of support. And we can also support the people that we care for to create these circles of support or to join existing ones. And to understand that defenders of defenders need healing, because when we don't heal, we are very nasty and we are not really good people. And we go home and, and it becomes very difficult. So at organizational level, try and see if you can again create support, circles of healing where you meet and talk about experiences, but bring in families, because many families don't know what we do. They don't understand, why we go home and we are shouting and barking. They don't know where we've come from. So if we're able to take them to work, if we're able to create, culture days so that people understand where we come from, that will, that will also help. So that is what it is, and Wangechi and others.
Thank you, Hope. Thank you. And thank you for reminding us of the importance of also care for the carers and healing and support. We have 10 minutes, so I suggest we take a few questions and then I'll come back and ask each of the panelists a question. Liz, are you monitoring the questions, or shall I? There's one question for Abby. How do you foresee the yoga approach can and should be adapted to ensure cultural, contextual appropriateness?
And then Claudia, there's another question which I'll just paste into the chat for the entire panel.
Okay. And there's also another question. I'll just put them out there, and then maybe anyone from the panel can answer. Someone's asking about literature on arts-based therapies, particularly dance movement psychotherapy, that the literature is still quite limited. Does anyone have any experience with these types of therapy? This is what's in the chat, but I'm not monitoring the Q&A. So Liz, if you have more.
No, that's about it at the moment. But thank you everybody for sharing the brilliant resources. Back to you, Claudia.
Okay, who wants to take first? Maybe Abby, you can have a go at the first one, and then I'll come back.
Sorry, I had to unmute. The adaptation of yoga to the circumstance was something that we were very concerned about when we worked with trauma-informed yoga in Nicaragua. It had never been done before. And even though I had concerns about whether or not it would be adaptable, by having a give and take relationship with the women, getting feedback about what was working and what wasn't working during the process of yoga, really helped to the yoga instructor, who was not myself, to adapt as she went. She used her knowledge of hatha yoga and her insightfulness, and then we would adapt what we were doing with the program to the way that the women were responding to certain postures, to certain things. What we did find out was that the spoken component of the yoga was incredibly powerful, along with the postures. This was a program that didn't involve talking about the trauma the women had been through. It was focused solely on yoga, but the messages of love and groundedness, of being centered and focused, of letting go of things, taking in things that the yoga teacher provided were incredibly impactful. And what I would say is getting feedback is probably the best way to ensure that you're grounded in the culture that you're working in. And, I never would have expected the kind of results we had in Nicaragua with 5 young women who had never practiced yoga, never even heard of yoga. And it really did change their lives. It opened up a whole new chapter for all of them. And many of them continue to practice on their own. They use their postures when they have moments. So I think yoga provides an incredibly adaptable format, as long as we're responsive and engaged with the people we're working with.
Thank you, Abby. Also, Hata Sharif has contributed that I use EMD and NET with music for survival of trauma, and is much effective, and yoga as well. So there's a lot of other experiences. Liz, do you want to pose the question that was for all the panelists?
For all panelists, any tips on how to increase buy-in of embodied and trauma-informed practices in more traditional business? Oh no, that wasn't the original one, or traditional or context. So basically, how to get buy-in for this type of approach in more traditional business contexts. Has anybody got any thoughts on that? And then there's another one previous to for the entire panel, if anybody wants to answer it. The issue of evidence for or literature on arts-based therapies for survivors of violence.
I can touch briefly on the art for survivors of violence. I think that the narrative exposure therapy, a pretty integral part of it is actually using art and dance to kind of reshape the trauma narrative, or at least kind of, in a safe and kind of guided way, encourage folks to kind of delve into that trauma narrative in a reflective way. And there's a pretty substantial evidence base for narrative exposure therapy, particularly in humanitarian and low-income context. For dedicated art and dance therapies, there's very small trials or very small kind of pilot studies in different parts of, in different humanitarian and low-income contexts, but they don't have the same robust evidence base that NET does, per se.
And then Claudia, the next question for the panel is, any tips of engaging with more traditional services or business context? And then we've got a question on measures, which I love. We have multiple questions coming in, so we might want to draw this to the close.
Yeah, let's. I think we can take two more. So we have one about the one that you post. Sorry, the one before, and then we have the one on measures.
Correct.
Then there's a question that can be answered maybe on the chat about people asking if there are any resources. If as a practitioner you want to refer someone to yoga based approaches, is there any resource like on YouTube or on the web that people can use? So that can be answered maybe in the chat. But Sophie, do you want to come in?
Sure. I mean,
I see you hesitate.
I'm hesitating because I don't exactly have a perfectly formed answer, but I can try on the question about bringing it into more business context. I think with heart, and I wish Joyce Christine, who's our facilitator, was on the call. She's traveling right now and couldn't make it. But I think with heart, we face a lot of resistance and questioning of what the practice is about, if it's going to conflict or have any tension with other religious practices or spiritual practices. And I think, having real space to unpack that in a meaningful way. So Joyce has a session at the beginning where she introduces what the program is about and really tries to invite these questions and doubts to come in. But then, moving from those doubts into like an experiential session and let's just come in and try and see how it goes, and everyone is always, of course, it's completely optional and voluntary. Nobody's forced into any of the sessions. And what we found, we have a group right now with staff and kind of picking up on some of the insights that Hope raised on the importance of these healing spaces for staff who are working with survivors. And, there was a lot of hesitancy to start. And now after 12 sessions, no one wants it to end. So I guess, my suggestion would be to open a meaningful dialogue around what the concerns are, to let them be there, not to try to pretend that those aren't there, but then to try to invite the group into some experience of the practice and see how it flows. And then, for some people, it's not going to work. I think it's not for everyone, but for the folks that it resonates with, generally it starts to become a bit of a virtuous cycle, and people want to keep coming back because they feel it within their own bodies that it's making a difference and having an impact.
Thank you. There's lots of interesting questions and time is running away. So I'm just going to take two more. One is about a question on quantitative measures, which I have now lost because kind of new ones have come in. Do you have any particular measures, quantitative measures, to capture the particular impact of the embodied aspects of these interventions? And then one last one that I will take, because I think it's also very relevant, is about whether any of this has also been, is there any research or practice in using this technique with boys and young men? So, what do we know about applying these to boys and young men generally, but I would also think of perpetrators.
I just sent a response directly to Len, because this is kind of one of my research interests specifically. Very quickly, because I know we're running out of time. SH Plus is currently in the process of a dedicated trial working with men in refugees in northern Uganda, because, to speak to Len's point, there is a paucity of literature specifically focusing on men and boys as both survivors of trauma and as perpetrators of gender-based violence. The other place to look, if you're curious, would be work done by Laura Murray and colleagues, specifically for the Common Elements Treatment Approach, or CETA, that worked with whole families, where women were receiving CETA, men were receiving cognitive approach, as well as this alcohol use reduction intervention, with the goal of decreasing the perpetration of gender-based violence. And they saw both improvements in men's mental health, as well as decreased incidence of gender-based violence within the family unit due to the mental health intervention. Yeah, there's plenty of work to be done, because men are kind of often left out, so to speak, despite the fact that they have an integral role to play in a lot of this research.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sophie, Dan, and Hope. And it's a shame that we have to cut it off, but on the positive side, we will have the forum. So a plug for the SVRI forum, which has been postponed to 2022, as you know, but hopefully we will be able to have it in person, fingers crossed, or if not, at least some hybrid form of, and we will pick up this topic and continue this discussion. So thank you all for this and the questions. I think the knowledge exchange is just the beginning. And, as people said at the beginning, not all sexual violence survivors will need a specific intervention, but, and those that do may need very different things, but it's really great to really see that the menu of possibilities is expanding, and that these more body-mind, mindfulness-based approaches are receiving more attention, and important to continue documenting so that we can overcome also some of the resistance that comes from funders and others that maybe see some of these approaches as less, less scientifically based, etc. So I think this is a really good start. Thank you all. And with that, I would like to hand over to Anne Ekman, who, as Liz said, those who may want to leave, please feel free to leave. Anne is going to spend the next 15 minutes.
Just 2 seconds. We might just want to show the gratitude cloud before people.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I forgot about that. Do you have the...
Lisa will share it now.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot about the gratitude cloud. I was reading, there was a lot of stuff coming in the chat as well. Not everybody did it in the Mentimeter. Community, family, sunshine, women, health, warmth, returning to myself, relationships, the internet, catching snakes. That's an interesting one. Trauma recovery practices, nature. I saw in the those that came in through the chat rather than the Mentimeter also mentioned the seminar, these opportunities, these new approaches. So lots of positive things, but particularly community, family. I think Hope reminded us really that, whatever the intervention or the therapy is, having the way it's delivered is also important,
Yeah.
and the importance of empathy, of compassion, of cultural and context sensitivity, survivor-centered, all of those things matter as much as whatever the approach is. And sometimes, The approach may be scientifically very proven, but if it's delivered in a very uncaring, unsympathetic way, it's not gonna achieve what it aims to achieve. So thank you all. And now I will hand over to Anne for the next 15 minutes, guiding us through another experiential moment. Over to you, Anne.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Claudia and Liz, and to all of the panelists and everyone who's been so engaged with the chat. This has been just wonderful. And I'm really grateful that we have this moment for another chance to extend this exchange and do it by trying out a different body-based experiential to sort of continue our learning together. In terms of the experiential we're going to try out, it really continues some of what Niyati started in terms of giving us that opportunity to really connect with positive resources, with a sense of replenishment, and then also what we just got to see with the gratitude cloud of really engaging bodies as one way to replenish and nourish ourselves. And there are a range of ways to engage body and healing, but that is a foundational one. And so the particular practice that we're going to do together actually draws from somatic experiencing, which is one particular trauma healing modality that engages the body within this broader constellation of modalities and traditions that we've been talking about. And I just want to flag that this practice today includes really two particular aspects, one of which is called orienting. And orienting really means taking that moment for us and our bodies to look around, scan our environment, have a broader view of what is happening. And then the second aspect is also called tracking. And this is really a technique to bring some focused attention to tracking physical sensations in our body as a particular portal of experiencing our embodiment. And when I say tracking physical sensations, I mean something like when I have a little bit of a sense of excitement, like I notice my spine lengthens, I notice my chest expands, sometimes I get tingling. So that's that sort of level of physical sensation and tracking that this practice is talking about. And so in terms of applying and drawing on these traditions of orienting and tracking together, we're going to really do this in the context of orienting to something positive, replenishing, nourishing for ourselves in this moment. So as we're going to transition into actually doing this exercise, I do want to invite people to take just a second to, if you haven't done so already, give yourself permission to move your body, maybe move your seat. We've been sitting probably fairly still, looking at each other and the screen. So go ahead and give yourself a chance to do that. Also take a breath or anything else that just lets yourself settle and feel a little shift in this moment. And then if it feels okay to you, I might suggest as well that you consider closing out the chat, or at least paying a little less attention to that. So we give that part of our brains a bit of a pause and a break just for the next few moments, okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and guide us through this practice with some prompts. And for those who want to give this a try, I invite you to join, and please know that you are also equally welcome to participate by observing or whatever feels best, and to shift and do whatever feels best at any point in this exercise, okay? And so with that, go ahead and give yourself one more moment to make sure you're seated as comfortably as possible. And again, to invite any additional stretch or movement that might feel good. And then what I'd like to do is to now invite you to take a moment and really look around your current surroundings, giving yourself and your head and body a chance to really look fully around where you are. And do this with an aim now of finding something that you can see that seems on the pleasant or uplifting end of things, or if you are somebody who's using hearing more, something that you can hear that feels on the more pleasant or uplifting end of things. And as you identify this, please be sure to let yourself really take in a full view or experience of what it is that you have found, allowing yourself to keep making contact with it and noticing what about it connects for you. Is it the colors or shapes or patterns or textures, or perhaps associations or memories or particular meanings that you associate with whatever you found? And just give yourself a moment to continue enjoying whatever it is that you are noticing. And now, while you are still taking in whatever it is that you've noticed, an additional invitation is also to bring a light curiosity to checking out how this is landing for you in your body, on your body, in your being, really in terms of noticing what sensory information is letting you know that you're experiencing something pleasant. And perhaps take a moment to notice with a brief scan, really the location or locations of where you're noticing what your body registers, whether it's your face, torso, something as small perhaps as your toes or fingernails or an eyelash, if it's in your mind, if it's the energy around you. And just take a moment to sort of track and notice what's happening for you. And as you're continuing to notice whatever is showing up, also maybe consider anything about noticing some of the qualities of the sensations, whether you might be experiencing some tightness or ease, heaviness or lightness, a particular temperature, a mix of temperatures, warmth or coolness, tingly or smooth sensations. And if there's any motion or energy moving, is it moving fast or slowly, or in what direction? Yeah, and just continuing to give yourself a bit of time to track whatever it is you're noticing now. And then also perhaps take a moment and see if things are shifting, if they are, if they're staying the same and still, whether they may be more intense or less intense, whether sensations are concentrated or expanding, or whatever else is happening. Just giving a moment to follow whatever that is and to notice. And then as we're getting ready to close this practice, maybe allow yourself just one more scan of your experience, of your body, and noticing if there's a particular place or places that have stood out and that you just want to mark for yourself, and give yourself a moment to just notice wherever those are, if they're present for you. And then at whatever pace is right for you, the invitation is to sort of gently begin to transition your attention sort of back to the fuller room, maybe blinking your eyes a couple of times, and then also gently transitioning back to that sense of us being together more fully in this space with each other, and perhaps even looking back at the screen so we can see each other. And as you're arriving back, just giving an extra moment to notice what's different now. If there's anything that you can kind of check out that may be different for yourself. Okay. So thank you, everyone. I think we're going to try to go ahead and take just, oh, sorry. Here. Oh my goodness, that was well timed.
It was your timer.
Oh my God. But what we thought, we know it's a big group, and yet that it might be really nice for anyone who feels comfortable to just share a moment about what you might have noticed while doing this. Like for me, I'll share that initially I really noticed my heartbeat and a little shaking out of my nervousness. And then I ended up taking a look at something that's a calming image for me and really felt some dropping through my chest and spine. So that's the sort of noticing. I don't know if anybody wants to come off mic and just share anything about your experience, and of course, no pressure.
And while people might be trying to work out how to raise their hand or unmute themselves, I wanted to say that I felt actually quite teary, but it was joy because I was looking at a picture of my boys when they were little, and so it was just so much joy that came, and I felt now I feel a lot more calm because of course running webinars can be stressful and anxiety provoking, but this has been such a wonderful, relaxing, incredible group, and that was such a great way of bringing me back into my body. While I was talking, I'm not sure anybody else raised their hand. Is there anybody on the panel that would like to? So Hator Sharif said he or she's feeling, or them are feeling pain in their shoulder, but now they feel relaxed. Thank you for sharing.
Okay. Yeah, and I think we don't have a lot of time to dive into that, but taking a slightly broader lens, I think another question probably for all of us is just what is it like to pause and engage in an exercise like this? We had the chance to do that at the beginning with Niyati's facilitation, and then being able to stop and do this now, and just don't know if anybody wants to share anything. Like I said, probably a bigger question than we have time for, but it's something to consider.
Anne is saying that she or he or them are feeling relaxation, calmness, and hope.
Okay. Yeah, and Samantha Wellen has raised her hand, and I don't know if you want to come off mic, Samantha. Or on mic, I guess it is.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to say, I think it was, for me, I mean, this webinar brought up so much stuff, both in terms of professionally what we should be doing and personally why we do it and our stuff, for want of a very smart word. So I think, and what you did was really grounding and powerful. And I found myself looking at a carving a friend of mine makes of African mermaids, and she happens to be holding a gold bunny. And it just had such an amazing feeling of containment and safety, which we often don't have in doing this work. So for me, it was powerful, but I think as a process in this kind of work, it's so important. So thank you, everyone, for today.
Thank you. Yeah, Samantha. Yeah, and I know I think, Liz, did you want to,
No, Joy has said that she's feeling much more relaxed and much more courageous. So you're bringing out this really positive and brave feelings in us, Anne. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing and participating. And I would just note that one of the things about orienting to something that's resourceful is that often in trauma and when we're facing threat, our field of vision gets so narrow, just physiologically. So part of this is an opportunity to really do something different when it feels safe enough to do that. And also then to experience finding safety and support, which I think also that sense connects so deeply to the theme of collective healing, being in community, being in circles. So that, to me, that's a pretty close connection there that I just wanted to highlight. And also, as many have said, like coming into noticing our bodies doesn't always feel safe. It's a journey. And so also some of this, and I think other practices also are really offering choices about how much and to check out, you know, whether that's available today or not, or if this is even something that feels like a support. So with that, I just want to say a deep gratitude to everyone here for being able to try this and experience this. And if it's something that connected for folks, hope that you can use it. And just deep appreciation, as others have shared also in the chat in other ways, for the chance for this exchange among all of us to be exploring this and seeing where it goes. So back to you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Anne. Klima, we see your hand up. Do you want to just take one more final person, Anne? So Klima, I think you can.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello. Can you hear?
We can.
Okay, I would like to introduce myself first. I'm a GBV specialist. I work in Sudan. And I was really interested because I had a little bit of experience to work on MSPSS when I was in Gambia. And that time I used to work with psychologists who were really, really trained on mindfulness and all those things. So from there, I got ideas that it's really helpful, especially to integrate in the programming. So I saw that this is an innovative approach to support a survivor of sexual violence. But I'm a programmer, so my question will be more programmatic. And I work in the humanitarian settings, and I believe that these kind of activities, integration inside the Women's Center or the safe spaces, I mean, especially women and girls safe spaces, where we do GBV case management during the counseling process, this can be integrated there. And you know that this is kind of skills. And the people normally at our level or educated class, they have this kind of knowledge. And we practice through Android and the mobile and these things. But when we work in a fragile context, we have a lot of cases and also women with distressed mental conditions. So I don't know how you are thinking broadly instead of individual cases. I mean, when I'm a program and I look into more people, I mean, especially more women and girls reaching who has these supports. And you understand when a refugee influx happens, people leave. I mean, just think about Ethiopian crisis. So if I want to include these kind of things in a setting where we do not have skilled
Klima, I think that you are reaching some deeply into the key considerations of the field, and we really are grateful for your questions. We have come to the end of the webinar. I am so sorry, but what we can do is to, we will answer your question by email, if that's okay, and I'll reach out to, if you share your email with me in the chat, we will reach out to you. But we do appreciate your questions and your ideas. And that your issues that you raised are really, really important, is how do we move from the individual to reach broader, more community-based approaches using these types of these tools, these really important tools. But what I would really like to do is that I know we've taken far too much of everybody's time, more than what we had, but I really want to hope that by sharing this time together, we have left behind a little bit of unnecessary or unneeded anxiety, and that we're all feeling a little bit more comfortable and safe in our own bodies. And that I hope that together we can do more and share more and ask questions more, like Klimas. Thank you for that. And again, thank you for sharing this time with us. Thank you for this wonderful panel, and thank you for your generosity and spirit. We really do look forward to continuing these conversations, hopefully at the forum, but also by email and through the updates and by many other ways. So thank you so much. And thank you again, this amazing panel. We're going to see you again in Mexico, I hope, inshallah. Thank you.
Thanks to Liz also for getting this organized and for the knowledge exchange.
Thank you so much. Absolutely.